Can't hear you.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. All right. Shall we get started? Vera Kern, and you'll be talking about Android data binding, which is just great. Okay,
Awesome.
go for it.
Well, hi guys. I am an Android developer. I've done it for 8 years now. So I hope I can share some knowledge. I prepared a small presentation, and we'll just go through it so everybody's definitely on the basic of a data binding, because I've heard that it's the last part of the course, so not everybody might have been there. And then I have Android Studio open. We can just try out some things. Data binding is a pretty big library, like it can do a lot of things. So I didn't want to just bore you and repeat everything. And some of the things I might not know, but we can just
Sure that it won't be boring.
Sorry?
You don't have to worry, it won't be boring.
Probably not.
Not at all, not at all.
I don't know, maybe. Okay, I'll start sharing.
Just one reminder is, so you will do the screen sharing, that's fine, that'll be great. If we get into a long discussion, then
I'll
unshare the screen so that we can all see each other's faces. Great, okay.
Awesome. I have a small real estate on my screen, so we'll see. Can everybody see this first slide?
I can.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to just start with what is data binding. Data binding is a library that comes out of Google, so it's not a third party that developed it. And it was started to remove a lot of boilerplate code of the kind where when you have a activity or a fragment and you want to fill the views with some data, where you always had to say, find this view by ID, and then you like set text on this or set the image or something. So that is the main purpose of data binding, to help bring together the UI and the code in an easier way and still keep them generally separate in the code. So one of the main things it's used for is to fill data into UI. And then it can do a lot of other things. For example, you can actually set your event listeners in it, and you can write data back to your class as well. So if you have an input method, a field that has an input, like a text edit text, or a checkbox or something, it can also automatically write that data back into your object. And I'm going to start with the very basic stuff, just like we have a data class and we have UI and we want to bring it together. But before you can use it, you have to tell Android or your Android project that you want to use it. So in the Gradle file, that is for your app module. So not the main application Gradle file, but the one below it. That's where you have to put this little blob to tell your application that you're going to use data binding. And you don't have to import a library or anything. This is everything you need. So there are nothing in dependencies that you need. You need a certain Gradle version, but since you guys all started recently with Android, or at least for this project, there's very little chance that you are not on the required Gradle versions. I wouldn't even worry about that.
So just an odd question. If you'll go back to the previous slide, would there be a reason for not enabling data binding? Why did they make that an option that's by default?
You don't have to. So there are other things you could. There is a library that Jack Wharton wrote before data binding was a thing, which my guess is Google took as an inspiration. It's called Butterknife. And it does less, but it does exactly a lot of the taking off boilerplate code. So a lot of projects might still use that.
So the idea is to keep it from conflicting maybe with Butterknife?
With conflicting, but also, so data binding has to do some things ongoing as you're writing your layouts to create the boilerplate code that you then need in your activity to use it, as we will see. And if you're not using it, it shouldn't really do that.
Right.
So you don't want it to just run by default, because it does things. It doesn't just react, but it would make things, I guess. And I guess they just want people to be able to decide to do that. Maybe other people would be upset if they didn't have full control over their project. So the very basic idea is you have a class, which is a very plain data object. I took as an example movie. And you have the attributes that you have for movie in there. There's a bunch of strings. There is an int, there's a float. And I left it out here for space reasons, but you need to have a constructor in there, and you definitely need the getters and setters. But Android Studio can auto-generate these. If there's a question around that, I'm happy to answer this. But this is basically like, we have a class, it's called movie, and hypothetically we would get like a bunch of movies from a database maybe, or from the network. And we have a corresponding UI that helps us display this information about each movie in a certain way. And then on the right, I put a layout, and the difference here is that after the first line, that is always the same, we don't start off with the root layout, but we have to put a tag called layout, and that will actually hold all the XML namespace declarations. I just put ... because it was too long, but it's just the normal stuff that is there. And if you have more of them, like if you use constrained layout, you would probably have an XMLNS :app, and then you might have the tools one as well. They would all go up there. And then there's actually, this is wrong, this should be an open data tag. So imagine I'm opening a data tag, and then there is a variable in there, and I will talk about this. Then you close the data tag, and then you would start your normal layout as you would write it. And then at the very end, you have to close the layout tag again. And what this does is, in the background, creates a class that we will see in the next slide that connects these two, the movie and the XML. And so inside the data tag, you have a variable, and you give it a name, which is completely up to you. Of course, I called it movie, but you could call it whatever you wanted. And then you have to say which type it is. And this is just the path to the class that you made. So if your object is in if it's a structured project, you would probably have .data.model.movie or something like that, but I didn't want to go too long. But you just have to tell it basically what kind of object you're going to use in your layout. And then in your actual layout, you can reference the fields from your data class. So I made a text view in my constrained layout that has like a variety of attributes. And then instead of setting a text hard-coded, or instead of saying find view by ID r.id.movie title, set text, and then set the text, I just have the Android text tag, and then still in quotes, but then you write an at. What are those parentheses called in English?
Braces.
Braces. Braces. Okay. In braces, you write movie, which is your object. That's the name we gave it up here, and then dot, and then the field that it refers to from your Java class.
When is that data actually loaded in?
Sorry?
You're mapping the data to the UI, essentially, correct? So that
Yes.
is basically just like getting a class and saying dot, give me the title, and put it into the text view. Or, the text view. But when is that data actually loaded into that object?
Yes, we will see that I believe in the next slide. And obviously here it can't be, because movie is still just a type. We have no actual movie object associated. We don't have an instance of movie that is associated with it. So we wouldn't see any text in the preview right now if we were to look at it. And then when we go to our actual activity, we see that instead of setting the content view like we would usually do by just assigning it a layout, we use a class called activity main binding, which is auto-generated. And then there is a class called data binding util that has a method set content view, and you just fill this out. And then on that binding, you can say binding set movie. That method is part of the auto-generated class. And then you set a movie object to it that you have to obviously create. So I just wrote instantiate movie object, but that means like you have to call like a database or a network, or you just hard code a movie object to try it out. And then it will go through all the fields that you have defined here as like referencing the movie object in the XML, and then it will automatically set the text. Did you mean that?
Now, back to that the slide that one. Yep, that's a good one. What do you do if Android Studio, for one reason or another, does not create an activity main binding class?
Yes, happens a lot.
How do you diagnose that problem?
So generally, I find the library is a little unreliable in that area. Like sometimes it doesn't kick off the process to create that class, and sometimes even after you've built a few times successfully, it will tell you the package doesn't exist. So the class is put into a package called, so I named my little app data binding, so that's a little confusing here, but like it puts it in a package called data binding, and then it will just tell you, no, that doesn't exist. And unfortunately, mostly these are just very crude, usual things to do. Do the restart and invalidate caches thing. Make sure that your XML is correct. Like if you have a small error in your XML, how you use data binding, it will just often fail and not tell you really well what went wrong. So just taking out recent changes that you made in the XML helps. Sometimes it helps to just take out the type of the binding and start typing it again, and then suddenly it will find it again, or take out the import and do that. So it happens, and it's not rare that it happens, and it's basically like a matter of trying to just repeat steps, even though it feels really stupid, and then
Pounding on the desk doesn't work, eh?
Sorry?
Pounding on the desk doesn't work?
No, I have not successfully. It might help you, but
okay, all right.
Yeah, it's a little. I don't know why that is. I recently filed a bug about data binding too, so I don't know how stable. Like the library is fully out there. It's not an alpha or a beta version, but it seems to be a little have some hiccups. Usually, once you have it running, it should be okay, but it can happen, and it has happened when I prepared my example here, so it's not unusual.
Okay.
Let me see where so one thing that that this does is a lot of activity layouts are called activity_main, for example, so that in the resource folder you would see them all bundled together. That's what developers like to do. But the activities are usually called main activity. But what data binding does to create the name of the binding, it just takes the name of the layout, puts it into camel case, strips the underscores, and attaches binding at the end. So the binding is called activity main binding. But you can actually turn that around, and you can see it. Sorry, I have that closing tag everywhere. Should not be closing. Should
we'll live with it. That's fine.
Okay, and then you just say class equals, and then you can give it a name. So you just can turn it around and say main activity binding, and then in your main activity you can reference to it as main activity binding, which it's really like a small thing, and you don't ever have to do it. But I find it makes it much easier to refer to it. Number values. So when the first thing that we saw was just the title. So that's it's a string that is set as the text, which is fine. Now, if we want to put, for example, the rating of the movie, which I set as a float, you can't just assign that to the text. You have to explicitly cast it to a string, or like create a string out of it. So be sure to use string value off. And that means you can actually use method calls in here. Like there's any method you want to use from the string class, you could call here with a value from the data object that you have.
So you could conceivably embed some tricky logic in there.
You can, and you should definitely not.
Idea. What? And you should definitely not, is what you said?
Yes, we can talk about that more, but like
I'm not suggesting that it's a good idea. I'm just saying it's possible.
Oh yeah, it's possible. You can do a lot of stuff that you should not do.
Right.
It has a full, like you can use Boolean operators in it. You can check for equivalence and stuff, and no one can read it in the end.
Right.
But we'll see a few examples, I think. Then there's conditional statements. Like, for example, this is a little contrived, but I had movie, so I added a subtitle to the movie, and I said that if the title is null, there happens to be no title, then it should show the subtitle instead of the title. And that can be shortened to the double question mark, which is the same. So that the second line reads as, if movie title is now, I moved it around, show the movie subtitle instead as a value. And then you can use conditional statements. And this is just one example with smaller, but you can use smaller and equal and greater and equal. And so here I said, if the rating is smaller than 5, I don't want to show the rating because we don't want to tell people how bad this movie is. And actually, I had never really used that, and I tried to build it, and it complained. And I learned that you have to put the you have to escape them. And this obviously no one can read. So actually, and plus you have the 5 hard-coded in your XML layout. That means you have, in a way, you have logic in your XML. So this whole thing isn't a great idea. What you should do is you can add a method to your movie class that is called isBad. And you can have a constant in your movie class that says at what rating a movie is bad. And you just return a Boolean. And then in your text view, you can use that. You can reference the method just as you would reference a field and ask, is the movie bad? If so, make the visibility invisible. And if the movie's not bad, then show the rating. So that's a better way to keep the logic in your data class and keep your layout sane and not have the logic in there. You can manipulate strings. Like you can literally write into the brackets, and you can like concatenate strings. You can write like director, space, and then the movie director field. I don't think it's a great idea. First of all, you won't get anything translated if you ever want to translate your app, and just you have a hidden string somewhere in your layout. So if you want to do it this way, the better idea would be to, in your strings file, to have a director label string that has a placeholder in it. And you can then call the string class with format, and you can reference the string from the inside the data binding, which is pretty handy. And then you can just say format that director label with the movie director.
So are those intentionally back quotes in the first example on this slide?
That's what I found.
And
it might work with normal quotes too. I think it's just a way because you have nested quotes in a bunch of places. So it's like a matter of like, I think basically you can always rotate between normal quotes, back quotes, and single quotes. You just have to make sure that you're only using one of each. Otherwise the thing gets confused. So it might work with single quotes as well, but that's what I found. But I would just say avoid that in general and do the second line. You can reference other elements that you have in your layout. So I put the ratings text view here, and I said if the movie's bad, hide it. And then I said, and I only want to show the cast if the rating is shown. So basically, if the movie's bad, we're not going to show the people who was in the movie for whatever reason. And then you don't have to repeat, is the movie bad, then show or hide. You can just say the visibility of the cast text view is the same as the visibility of the, of the rating text view, which is pretty handy, especially if you have a bunch of them. And before constraint layout, you might have grouped them in their own parent layout and then just hide or show the layout. And this is just like with one change, you can easily hide and show all of them, which is pretty handy. You can set event listeners. So where before you would, in your fragment or activity or wherever you would do it, say like set an on-click listener to a view. Here you can define your own method in your activity that is, I named it on button click. And then in your XML, you can refer to it. And I just saw that I will show you something in code. You have to add something to I forgot to add that. So up here where you define all your variables and imports, you would say, I have handlers, and then you just point to the Java class that accepts events from these handlers. So in my case, it's my main activity. I kept it really simple. And then in the layout, I would just refer to the handlers here and have a double colon and say the method that you should call when someone clicks on me is called onButtonClick. This is one of the cases where it's like, if you have a really simple onClick and do it, overall, I don't know. For me, there's already logic in here that should be actually in Java code and not in XML. But depends on the simplicity of your app, and if that's your preference to do it this way, do it. I would be a little careful here.
I'm trying to think of a situation that would be that would welcome this sort of approach, because I'm not sure what you're gaining here, except a little bit of indirection.
Well, you're gaining to not have to call find view set on click listener this, or write your anonymous inner class click listener.
But you wouldn't normally have to do that with an onClick. Or am I missing something?
Well, if you would have a normal onClick, your button would have an ID, and you would find the button, and then you would set an onClick listener. And you always have to write the onClick method anyways, right? Because you have to say what to do. So yeah, I don't see. And when you look at the activity or the fragment, it's very hard to understand that this element has an event registered to it. That's why I don't like it. I find that the whole thing makes a lot of sense to me. Is like you have data objects and you want to just fill out a form in a way. This to me is a little bit different, but it's possible. Okay,
all right. Rakesh says it's removing boilerplate code to handle the view IDs in layout. I'll think about it.
Yeah, that's just, it's the same thing. Like you don't have to do the find blah 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 thing. But yeah, it also removes when I look at the activity, I know that which elements have a click handler attached to them.
Right.
So it might make it harder to read. And then data binding actually can go both ways. You can have an object and it can write to your class, to your XML, but the XML can write back. So I added a field to the movie class that is called review. It's a string, and I added an edit text. And the difference here is that the Android text has not just the @ and then the brackets, but it has @ brackets. And that means that when someone, did I add this? No. When someone types something into the edit field, the binding will write it back into your data class, into the field review. But you have to keep in mind, it only writes it to the object that you're currently holding in memory. It doesn't do anything to preserve the state. Like you are still responsible for writing this back into a database, or for saving it on disk, or processing it in any other way that you would like to do. So it's just a way to getting it back, but then you are responsible for preserving it if you want to. This is a very basic overview over data binding. There's a lot more that it can do, but I'd rather we talk about it or try something out than repeat every single detail. I also opened where did I put them? I have a few websites that are pretty good, but I don't know where is it this one? Nope. You guys talk and I look. Ask me a question, or
let's do questions, and when the questions settle down, we'll see if we can get you to do an example.
And I have basically what I've shown you, I wrote in code too, so we can also look at it and try it out and play with it if you guys want to.
Okay, let's see if there are questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that the data binding is a lot quicker then doing a bunch of find views by IDs, correct?
No, it basically just writes that code for you in a class that it doesn't show you.
So there's really like no performance difference between the two different ways?
No, it literally just writes it for you. And I mean, I remember when I did my talk about layouts, a constraint layout, I like this class, there was a class with the flight information. There was a lot of information in there. So if you had a data object that would hold all of the information, like you would probably have like 10, 15 lines that would just find views and fill out all that data, and it would just take that away from you.
Yeah, makes sense.
It is that for that it's nice, but they can't make it any faster. They still have to find the views. It might, now that when I think about it, it might do it in a way where it basically only runs over the XML once because it already knows all the ones it needs to find. So maybe the initial part is faster, but ongoing, I don't think so.
Other questions? All right, so let's take a look at an example here.
Okay, so I used the movie example. I have a movie class here with the fields you already saw, and I created a static member that just is a movie, so we have something to use and don't have to make a network call or anything. And then I have an activity here, and I set up the binding to set the view, and then I set the movie with the hard-coded movie that I have, and I set my handler for the event listener. And what's that? And my main activity, somehow, one second, I'm gonna close this. This is also something that started happening to me. A preview doesn't always render, and then you have to like tell it to refresh, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So for now, we don't have the preview. And there's
Don't you love demos?
Sorry?
Don't you just love demos?
Oh, it's great, yes. And like usually after a few times you've built or something, and then it will show up again.
Yeah.
It's like Android Studio, like started off pretty well, then it dipped down a bit, then it got really good again. Like everything's better than Eclipse, so I'm always grateful for Android Studio. So I think I have an emulator running. Let's see. So I'm just going to hit run again so we see it come up. And I just put a background for image. I didn't want to do with image loading right now. And here's where you see the layout. And now for fun, we're going to change the rating to something below 5. And we're going to use the, let's see what it does. Oh, it does. So it doesn't show me the rating, and it doesn't show me the cast anymore, because for both of them I said don't show it to me. And then I just realized I have the runtime in here, and I think in here in the runtime I did something that you also shouldn't do. So I put my format logic in here just so you see that you can't do that. So I have a string in my strings file that has 2 placeholders, one for hours and one for minutes. And here in the XML, I say, so you can literally call a string and make it a method or a function, and then save and pass in the values for whatever placeholders you have in the string. So I say the movie duration divided by 60 to get the hours, and then the movie duration modulo 60 to get the minutes. And it works, but obviously, like, there's no fine tuning around, like, what if it's under an hour? It will just say 0 hours. That's kind of awkward. You can't differentiate between hours and hour if you have one or more, but it's possible, and you can do a lot more things like that. You could probably write all of that. You could say like something like, if movie duration divided by 60 is smaller than 1, then show this, but that is, no one can read that. Everything is in parentheses, like the highlighting is already not great, the syntax highlighting in this. So I would highly tend to keep things like that in Java code and have methods that you can reuse across your application that you can just call. And you can call methods in here. For some reason, I couldn't get it to work earlier, so we can try again, but I can't promise that it works. But we can create a utils class, and we can have a method in there that is public, should probably return a string, and we'll just call it get name. I can't think of anything right now, and we'll just return a string for now. And then in your layout, you can say you can import the class so that the layout knows what methods you want, which class you want to use. And then you're supposed to be able to grab anything that's free. I'll just use the rating one for the record. Has a name at least. You can say, what was it called? My utils. My utils get name. And that is supposed to work, but I couldn't get it to work.
Let's take a look at the get name method again.
At the what?
At the get name method again that you created. Maybe it has to be static?
Oh, yes, but you are probably correct.
I'm so proud of myself.
That would make sense, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But also, it's so confusing to see everything. It didn't even build, I think. It did it. There. No, I did something wrong. It just says the name, which makes sense because I didn't put it into, this is I have to get used to this. You have to put it into the brackets. And now we have the evaluation there.
Oh, cool.
So you could put the whole logic around like how many hours and whatnot in a method, and then you can just call the method everywhere in your XML where you need it. Obviously, these methods need to return strings if you're using it for the text attribute. But like they could be something that returns a Boolean attribute if it's something that like if it's an attribute in XML that requires a Boolean return, or it could be a number. Like for example, you want to do calculations around what is my max lines that should be displayed in a text view. You could return an integer for that. So just be careful that whatever method you're calling returns the type that that attribute needs. You can try if the single quotes here work. See, it doesn't seem to. No. It doesn't seem to like them.
Likes only back quotes, eh?
Yeah, if.
All right.
Someone knows more. Yes, I like that too, that you can put methods in. Sorry, that's something someone in chat. Like, I like that too, that you can keep your logic, that you can call a method, especially if it's just like formatting, like more complicated, like date formatting comes to mind here, which is like something you should definitely do in code, but there's no point to setting it in code. You can just call the setting in from the XML.
Seems a very powerful feature.
Yes, and you can probably abuse it.
Of course.
You can write your whole app in XML.
That's right. That's right.
No more Java needed.
Do we have? Yeah. Do we have other questions?
Well, one of the questions I got is, how does this work when you're getting the data over a network connection, like a database or something, do you get the data from the database and then call the activity that binds the data, or do you call the activity and then it calls the database to get the data, then it binds it? Like, how does that work exactly?
So what you would do is, which is what I did here, because I tried something anyways. So you can hold on to the binding. It's just a normal object, and then you could not do this part. You would just create the binding. So there's a view, and your view could even have like a loading state, and you wouldn't see any of the framework for all your data yet. And then you would do however you get your data from a repository that calls the network or something, and that would probably come back to you at some point with something like on success, data. And then here you can refer to the binding and say set data. So you can use the binding. It doesn't have to be used. There's no like, it has to be the first line after the constructor or after the super call or anything. You can use it wherever you want all the time. So whenever you have the data, you can refer to it and show the data. And then you would also in here hide your loading view, for example, or if you had an arrow, you could also have like an arrow view that like, if this doesn't come back on success but on failure, you would show something else. So it has nothing to do with on create. You just use it to create the main content view, but then you can set it wherever you want, whenever your data is available. Which
I think makes sense.
Yeah, and you can also, like, this is one way of like, you just set the movie, but the binding also gives you access to all your, all the views. You can just talk to them. You can say, you could do that still by yourself. You could still set a text here. You just wouldn't have to say find view by ID. So for my button, the button doesn't have an ID, I think. See, that's probably.
So obviously, I'm guessing you couldn't do this like the set movie, for example, before you actually set the actual binding object. Is that correct?
Well, I have to create the binding object, and before I have it, I can't do anything, right? So this kind of has to be, basically see it as an equivalent to set content view. It's just a different way of doing that. But that you want to do early on because your activity needs a view. But then setting the actual data or in any way talking to the views, you can do throughout the whole life cycle of your activity or fragment.
Well, remember how, I might have got confused by that. Remember how earlier, how do I say this right? Let's look at your on-sys example, right?
On the what? The what example?
The little function you made below the on success that you kind of made up.
Yes. So this would, I mean, you could call this, if this could be a movie, and then you would just call, like, the method that it has, because I said I will use a movie object would be movie, right? You just have to make sure.
So you would have to do that first before you would have to actually set the actual views in the UI with the data, correct?
Well, so basically imagine that this isn't here. I mean, this one can stay.
Or does that one just map the whole thing directly?
Call repository for data with on, God, I can't type, with on success listener. So there would be something like repo get movie. I'm just making this up obviously right now, but you would have a method something like this, and you would pass yourself in as a listener, and this would implement an on success listener. And that would be the implementation of this listener. And so this repo, when it got its data from wherever it gets it, would return to this call with the data you asked it for, or not. I mean, it could also be like that movie might be null, then you have to handle a null case. But And maybe this listener has two methods. Maybe it also has an on failure method, right? And then you have to react to that. And maybe then the binding has maybe you wrote something in your XML that is like, it shows an exclamation mark or something, and you would.
Can you the binding variable? Can you put the dot real fast so I can see what methods it offers?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you have access to every view directly, the text view, the edit view, the.
Yeah.
So those are like individually set the views, but if you actually do like set movie, does it?
Then it fills them out the way you defined it here, like you said.
Okay,
like this one
that's kind of that's where I was going with this.
Yeah, and you can also do the like you can also reference other methods that like any view on Android can have an on-click listener, right? Like basically this is just in a very fast way of saying find view by ID. Here's the ID. It just already found all of them for you, and has little.
Yeah, that's handy, especially like some projects I had to do in the past for something. You had to get like a JSON response, and you had to map that JSON to objects, which is really annoying in Java, by the way. I can imagine when you map all the JSON to an actual object and then just pass it into the binding, it just handles everything with a lot.
No. So you will need a Java data object like movie for this.
No. Yeah, I understand that.
You cannot give it a JSON. Yeah. It does not know what to do with that.
No, I understand that. I was referring to if you already had the object that is matching what the JSON would map to.
Yes. So basically, it's just the second step. But there's libraries for going between JSON and a Java object. I hope you made use of that.
Yeah, it's still a little annoying. Those libraries are not as easy as like if you were to do that in like JavaScript or Python, but I mean, just JSON mapping itself in Java is a pain in the booty. Anyways, thank you.
So I'm thinking of this as a natural, either when you've got lots of views for which you would need to do find view by ID.
Yes.
Or when you've got only a few of them, but you want to simplify the logic with the views talking to the data. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes.
And are there other situations to avoid this other than that problem of it's not creating the binding class?
Sorry, to avoid what?
Are there other situations, let's say I had a decent number of find view by IDs that I would have to do, and that it would be cumbersome to do them because of the number of them that I would normally have to do, but are there still other reasons to avoid using binding when the number of views that I need to deal with starts to get large?
Well, the larger it gets, the more you want to use it.
Okay, all right. And that's it. That's just...
Yes, but like literally feel free to use it for one view. Like even if it's
right. Yeah.
But it definitely, I've never heard any problems around like, oh, I had 100. I mean, if you have 100 views on your screen, like I think your UX is a problem, but
yeah.
It doesn't have problems with many. And yes, the more you have, the more it makes sense. And
right.
Right now, I've only talked about using it with an activity or a fragment. You can use this in a recycler view. So like, which is obviously a typical case, right? Like probably I want to show a list of movies, and then in my view holder, I can use a binding and it will fill out everything. Not that it matters in terms of the amount of data fields that I have, but just it makes my view holder pretty small. I think I can, if that's of interest, I think I have a little project that we could look at. So here I have a list item which represents a movie. Maybe it will wait. It will work. Yes, it will. And it has an imagery which is not part of it, and it has a movie title again. where we fill in the name of the movie, and it has a director and a duration. And in our Java, we have an adapter, which takes a list of movies, and in where it creates the view holder, there is a method, like you have a binding. So the data binding library creates you the binding class for the list item, and it's called movie list item. So it's called movie list item binding. Surprise! And then you can call not set content view on it, but inflate, and you have to give it a layout inflator and a parent. Like no, and then you can return a view holder with that binding, and then in my view holder, in my constructor, I just take the binding, and because my super constructor needs a view as a parameter, so I just call binding get root, which returns the main view of that screen, and then I keep hold on of the binding, and then the image, because I treated the image separately. And then whenever a data object is attached to this list element, I just call the binding set movie, and we're good to go. So
Nice.
Your recycler view classes get a bunch smaller by this as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Are there other questions? Other questions for Vera?
Or was this just very confusing? I mean,
I'm speaking for myself. No, this is very clarifying.
Well, the example that you're using for this, are you going to release it for us to mess with?
sorry?
The example that we're looking at right now, this whole movie thing, are you going to release that so we can mess with it?
If you want to, I can. I didn't plan to. But
We can
sure.
add a link to it on the YouTube page.
Sure. Yeah, I can put it on GitHub.
That'd be awesome. It'd be especially like the way you call the data and some of those the XML ways. It was like I'm not going to be able to remember that. Like
Yeah, and it's like it's. Oh, here are all mine. Hello, are you gonna come up? No, but if we go to the main Google page for data binding, it gets, and so there's a long list. Sorry, I'm jumping around. Don't maybe close your eyes if this bothers you. I find that like over video, I find such things
Potentially disturbing.
Yes.
We have
Just
a question.
a list of like operators it can use. It can do math, it can do string concatenation, it can do logic, it can do binary, unary, it can do shift. I wouldn't even know how to shift things in XML. You can check type of class. I tried Googling this. I have no idea what it is. I couldn't find anything.
I haven't seen this.
Someone went to town at Google and was like, we're going to build, this is going to be Turing complete or something.
I haven't seen the double question mark before.
Oh, I talked about it real quick. It's one of the, maybe this one. Yeah, no, not this one. Maybe one of those.
You had a slide on it, I think, just before this. Yeah.
It's a null check. So in the second line shows it. If the movie title is null, show the movie subtitle.
Right.
So that's, yeah, I had never seen that as an operator before.
But that's unique to this syntax, this particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even see that in this.
It's got to be somewhere here.
There's just a ternary here, but
we have a question. Alex says, how far back is this feature available?
So there's a part of it here we can see, so you need Gradle 1.5 if that's a problem for you. I hope not. And I believe I have never had any problems with it. So definitely here, 7+. I hope you're not developing for anything below that, because even now phones are not really available with that anymore. I have built for stuff, but this is gone. So you can use it. There shouldn't be restrictions in terms of what you can support. 7 plus must even include gingerbread, if I'm not mistaken. So
It's
yeah,
around.
but it's a good question because often enough, that's like the bummer, right? You're like, oh, I want to use it. And then it's like, oh no, can't. Jelly Bean still has to be supported, or Kit Kat still has to be supported.
Right.
No, data binding, somehow they got it. I guess because it just generates code, it's not a big problem to back. It's not, doesn't have to be back parts of back. Whatever, I don't know these words.
It's been around for quite a while.
Compatible, it's not hard because they're just generating code for you in the background. They're not really using a library. Like on your computer, you need to have certain things, but you can just have them. And then they are just generating code for you, but it's plain Java code. So, or Android code, but it's so basic that basically they're just taking over some of the typing that you would usually do, which is not the same as like supporting certain features on certain platforms.
Right. It's a clean feature for them to plug into the platform.
I think this was a big delight for developers when it came out. They, for once, not a headache around supporting.
Right. Do we have other questions or requests?
And I mean, I'm just going to mention it because if this seems too big for it, like you feel like this is too much for what you want to do, there's a good library called Butterknife. It's written by Jack Wharton. I hope you know Jack Wharton at least. You've heard about him. He has done great things for the Android community. He used to be at Square. He's now at Google finally, and keeps pushing for good things. And he wrote a library called Butterknife, free, and it basically started this effort where like, I don't want to write these lines of code over and over again. And it's much simpler. It doesn't have all the logic stuff to it, but if you're just going for like, I don't want to find all my IDs by hand, this is a great little library to use.
Looks good.
I mean, everything he writes is good.
Yeah.
Like if there's someone to admire in the Android community, it's Jack Wharton.
That's at least one of the people. Well, Vera, thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. I'm going to convert this video to something that I can put on YouTube. I'll put it on YouTube within the next day or two. Vera, you're going to give me a link to the code that you've done, and that's wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Happy coding, and enjoy the rest of the Udacity course. Questions, anything, send it to us. Happy to see you again. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.